A grand plan to address the country's failing infrastructure. A total of 8.4 trillion pesos spread over 6 years. Designed to spur economic growth, to create jobs, to reduce poverty and to usher in a golden age. But the Duterte administration's ambitious build program has hit a snag. Blame it on the delayed 2019 budget. 100 billion pesos worth of key infrastructure projects and programs are now on hold. How will the government make up for lost time? How can the administration stage a comeback after a series of setbacks? So many questions remain, and we want to know the answers. In this CNN Philippines special presentation, Building for the Future, Part 2. Welcome everybody, thanks for fighting your way through the Manila traffic to be with us today. We always appreciate it. Pia, you and I stood here 15 months ago.
That's true, Andrew, and it's good to see you again. And it is so great to see so many of you here today in this auditorium. This is the second part, or part 2, of our Building for the Future forum. Last year we did quite a comprehensive review of this massive plan worth more than 8 trillion pesos.
I think comprehensive is a good way of describing that. We were here for a good hour and a half and we got through a lot of the key issues and we're hoping to do that once again today. I think the takeaway from last year was the fact that the government was very firm that there was a unity of decision, that they were on course with this project. It was going in the right direction. It was interesting hearing the criticism from the private sector saying, what about us? Where's the access for us, the PPP, the public-private partnership? I thought that was very interesting. And you can see why, because this is such a massive program. 75 flagship projects and many more on top of that. But of those 75, just let me read you a couple. 6 airports, 9 railways, 3 bus rapid transits, 32 roads and bridges, 4 seaports. So the question is, I guess, why we come back here? Why are we doing it again today? Well, President Duterte is beginning the second part of his administration. So we've got 3 years to go. It's a good time to revisit this to see whether this government, this administration, can deliver on what they call this golden age of infrastructure.
But Andrew, many things have happened since that first forum some 15 months ago. While the Build program has inspired much hope for the economy and relief that the country's infrastructure would finally be addressed, there are concerns about its impact on the country's debt, the chances of Congress passing the tax reform law for those much-needed funds, and the possibility of overdependence on foreign loans, especially from China.
That's right, and there was the hiccup. I wouldn't call it a black swan, because it's happened before, but there was the delayed budget. The first quarter budget discussions, I'll call them that, went on, and eventually the budget was passed in April. That, though, did mean delays. They had to enact the 2018 budget for the first part of this year, the Q1, and that led to delays in projects on Build.
And because of that and many other smaller hiccups, if you will, the government is on catch-up mode. Interesting, because last year, that's what we talked about, how the government is trying to catch up when it comes to infrastructure. So government on catch-up mode right now to meet its full-year economic targets. And now we want to know, are we doing enough to stay the course? Will we see a golden age of infrastructure by the end of President Duterte's term in 2022? And that's just 2 years and 10 months from now. And how soon will the economy benefit from Build?
So they're the questions, they're the big questions. I would like now to ask our panellists to join us on stage. And would you please welcome the Transportation Secretary, Arthur Tugade. Public Works Secretary, Mark Villar. We were going to be joined today by Ernesto Pernia, but sadly, due to personal reasons, he could not make it today.
But with us, Public-Private Partnership Center Executive Director Ferdinand Becson, economist and Albay 2nd District Congressman Joey Salceda.
And we're also being joined once again by members from the private sector. Please welcome George See. He's Chairman Emeritus of the Anvil Business Club, also with the PCCI and the Filipino-Chinese Chamber. And the Executive Director of the British Chamber of Commerce. Please welcome Mr. Chris Nelson.
Gentlemen, please have a seat.
And in the words of one of our colleagues, let's get after them. Gentlemen, again, thank you. And there's a couple of familiar faces. The two secretaries, thank you again for making your time available to us. We really do appreciate it. And thank you to all our guests this afternoon. I would like to direct my first question to Secretary Tugade and to Secretary Villar, if I may. We talked about the delays. We talked about the unexpected headwinds just then, just to set the scene, if you like. It's not just domestic with the budget delays. Also, the global economy has been slowing. 15 months ago, things were looking great. And there's been a few interesting developments, should we say, globally as far as the economies are concerned. So I guess my question, opening question, broad question, is what has been the impact on your timetable over the past 15 months? How negative has it been for Build, Build, Build?
For the last 15 months, we, as you have mentioned in your introduction, we have addressed 6 airports. We are now about to start 9 railway projects and many more flagship projects. There obviously was some delay caused by certain factors, which to our mind, we didn't consider it as an insurmountable issue, but rather we considered it as a challenge, still to achieve our targets. So that the Build, Build, Build team formulated a catch-up plan. Because of this catch-up plan, we were able to address the seeming delays caused by factors like delayed project, problems on right-of-way. These were addressed. So because of this catch-up plan, basically the catch-up plan consisted of 2 parts insofar as transportation is concerned. Number 1, we went into multiple contractors award. That's 1. Number 2, as we go into multiple contractors award, we do a 24/7 construction period. Remember that the projects then was predicated on 10 to 12 hours work time on a single contract. What we did was to divide the projects into phases so that you can have multiple contracts, and then we have imposed, or rather we have agreed with our contractors to do a 24/7. We felt then, by increasing the number of contractors and by increasing the number of working hours, we felt then that this will augur well to our catch-up plan. And so, in fact, indeed, we are there. We are on track right now.
So you're caught up right now? You're
We
back to where you
have
should
caught up
be.
right now. In fact, on some projects, it's advanced.
And then to you, Secretary Villar, from Public Works, where are you? Where are you similarly caught up?
Well, to begin with, last year we had a banner year. In fact, we've had the highest disbursement rate, 590 billion pesos. Of course, we all faced there were certain delays with the budget, but we did have continuing projects. So we did have disbursements in the first half of the year, not as high as we would have liked, but because of the delays, we did formulate a catch-up plan, which at this point we are where we expect to be based on the new circumstances.
So Secretary Tugade and Secretary Villar, like you were saying, you've already caught up. Wala nang problema, no problems. But when we talk about if we were going to assign a percentage to itong delay in the approval of the budget, what percentage would that be? How much of the delay is because of this delay?
Second, percentage-wise, on rough
Minimum,
estimate,
yeah.
maybe I will say it caused a delay of around 30 to 35% on our part. So that basically, because of that effect of 30 to 35%, we thought that the catch-up plan, and we believe then that the catch-up plan which we have formulated will certainly be able to put us on track.
Yeah, okay.
As far as looking at the statistics, I think there are 11 now under construction. Given there are 75, you've got another slightly less than 3 years on build. Only 38 of these 75 projects have been approved. How close do you expect to get to the completion at the end of the term of this administration to those 75 projects? How many will be done? What's the target?
Before I go into the generic percentages of how many or how much can be done, let me, if I may be allowed to inject certain specific things on the projects that appertains to the Department of Transportation. Number one, whereas before, some 15 months ago, we were talking of plans about rails. We're talking about subway and the railway tracks from Clark to Tuban, from the improvements of LRT1, LRT2, MRT7, MRT3, from the Bicol Express, and from the Mindanao Railways. Those were then plans. As we speak, except for the Mindanao project, which will hopefully be started by the first quarter of next year, except for that, everything now is, believe me, sir, under actual construction. If I go by percentages on what is being done now, I will go for other an attainment of 65 to 70%. Let me cite to you also matters related to the ports, airports. There is the Bicol International Airport that has been done, keep on shelf for many, many years. If I tell you now that we are now 57% completion and we are targeting actual completion of the structures by June of next year and be operational by end of next year, then that is a performance indeed. Put there the development on the Bulacan Airport, and believe me, that's just the airport.
Another unsolicited proposal.
Ma'am?
Another unsolicited
Yes, ma'am.
proposal. Yeah.
It's now, the Bulacan has been subjected to Swiss challenge, and it has been awarded. So the construction by the winning proponent will be started, he said, not later than the end of this year. So these are concrete manifestations of what is being done in relation to the build, in relation specifically to the Department of Transportation.
Okay, just before we move off this subject, Secretary Villar, on that point, because one of the issues about the budget delay was the underspend, and it's actually difficult to catch up to actually spend the money. There are sort of bottlenecks, etc. Is that an issue now, or is there a free flow of financing to where it needs to go?
Well, I think the DBM will attest to this. Last year, there was no longer a problem with underspending. If anything, we spent, more than we expected. But coming on this year, like we mentioned earlier, I look at it in terms of on a yearly basis. Of course, because of the budget delay, there were some delays in the first half of the year. But it was during that point that we had already been planning how we would catch up by the end of the year. So we have set a target of 700, more or less about 750 billion to disperse, which is significantly higher than the disbursements from the year before. At this point this year, we've dispersed about 300 billion. So we're catching up, and we expect to hit our targets. I think that's the important thing. We set a target for the end of the year, and we will hit it. And so eventually, in terms of, although the first or second quarter might not reflect, but eventually the third and fourth quarter will compensate for what is missing, and we will hit our targets by the end of the year.
To move on, I'd like to ask the private sector, if I could, from what you see about how the build is progressing. George, to you first, George C. Does what you're hearing, does that tally with what you're seeing and what you're hearing?
Yes, in fact, we welcome people, sometimes in some of the reports that say that it's behind, to come visit each of the areas that we operate in, and we operate in nationally. that the roads are being built, and it's going so fast. It's very unusual because we've been in different chambers of commerce, and actually it's not unusual for a project to take 9, 10, 15 years to start. And for this government, we're able to start it within its period and finish some of them within its period.
The British Chamber's perspective, we first of all fully support the infrastructure like a lot of the chambers. Do I think everything will be completed? I think the challenges you face are very hard. And then I think we've got to look at what is the impact later on. The other thing I would draw out, of course, is that the target keeps moving. We're in a great place here, BGC. It just keeps expanding from the private sector, which then puts more strain on the infrastructure and what you have to meet. So we fully endorse the direction. I just think the challenges are going even more because the private sector is also going very strongly, which is great for you to try to meet. But we should remember that. And I also think we've got to look at plans going forward in terms of education, in terms of how you commute. This is a prime example. And I just make one comment. These gentlemen, Secretary Gagade, Villar, they were all in London last year, actually next almost 1 year. And I think London is a great example of how you can move a lot of people around on public infrastructure. And therefore that, to me, will be the challenge going forward, how you educate people once you commit these. Because we sit in a place where it will take you 30 minutes to park your car.
Just before we wrap this up, I'd just like to ask you, Joe, if I could, talking about budgets being approved, realistically, let's come back to this 75 projects. What realistic will be achieved by the end of this administration? It won't be all 75, will it?
Well, I can speak for our department. Of course, the 75 was identified by the NEDA, but I can speak for the Department of Public Works and Highways. In terms of our roads and bridges, all of our plans that the major projects, which include some of the bridges and major roads, the Luzon Pine Expressway network, all of them are either in advanced stages of construction or in terms of planning, they're ready to be started in time to be finished by the end of the term of the president. So I would say a bulk, super majority of our projects are slated to be finished by 2022, which was really the original plan. Of course, we have also projects that are long-term. These projects don't end just at 2022. We've built a pipeline of projects that runs to the hundreds of billions of pesos, and we've never had a pipeline that big. So what we have planned so far, we're on schedule. But of course, we don't think just to the end. There's no hard stop at 2022. We still have a pipeline of projects that we will continue to pursue.
But you're saying you're ahead of schedule for projects that are already under construction, meaning that they have been approved. Yeah, but there are also like 38, something like 38 projects that have not yet been approved. And of course, the next question is, and we wish that Ernie Pernia was here to answer that, is when is this going to get approved? No, what's going on? Why is it taking so long? Does anyone have the question, or are we going to go to a break first? I think.
Would you like to have a go?
Yeah, insofar as the Department of Transportation is, as I mentioned earlier, if I were to be followed, hopefully I'll try to strive for a 100% attainment of what I have formulated. But putting realities to what is, if I make 70 to 75%, I'll be more than happy. Let me cite to you certain specifics. Number one, please note that we are introducing another concept, the concept of partial operability, meaning we will not wait
And if the project isn't finished yet, portions
they
of it
can be operational and
Okay.
can be used
Yeah.
as the projects progress.
Secretary Tugade, can you hold that thought? We need to take a very quick break, Andrew. We're going to continue this discussion, very interesting discussion.
Thank you very much.
After this break.
Briefly, just finish your
On
thought
partial
there.
operability, it has to be admitted that there are certain projects that cannot be fully completed during the term of the president. But our obsession, our target is to be able to experience the comfort of the infrastructures we are putting up during the term of president, so that we have introduced what we call partial operability, meaning to say we don't have for the entire project to be completed when certain segregable phases can be done, then it can be enjoyed and be partially operational.
I just want to come back to talk about domestic investment a moment. If I could turn to you, Congressman. Is the funding and the debt to GDP ratio comfortable? Because we spoke about this last year, and the Budget Secretary, Diokno, at the time, said that growth of the Philippines will offset the growth of debt, basically, because of the terms of the debt we're getting, which I understand. But growth in the Philippines, a full percentage point has been knocked off, looks like it'll be knocked off this year and perhaps next year. That's what the forecasts are. Is that enough to worry you that the budget will not, or the debt won't blow out the deficit?
No. Number one, because our debt to GDP is only 41. Of course, under the plan, it should have been 36, which means that the economy should be running faster at 7.5%. Instead, we're running at 6.2 on the average. With respect to going down beneath 5.5, I don't think so. It was really because of the budget delay.
You don't think we're going to get, it's going to drop that much?
I'm not too worried about the cyclical things like even a US-China trade war. I'd rather go into the structural changes that are being done on the reforms. The more secular trends in the Philippines, especially the demographic, and plus, of course, our sociocultural specificity as a nation, I think really augurs well for a stronger growth than what most people expect. So what's really missing is the private corporate response to the public investment program stimulus.
Last year, we remember very clearly, Ed Francisco of BDO was saying that they had wished that they could participate more in the Build program. And now that the government is playing catch up, or well, now they're saying we're not trying to catch up, no? Should there be, should there be more public-private partnership? Should there be more private sector involvement in this Build program so that we do see the golden age of infrastructure by 2022?
So my reply to that is there's actually quite a healthy participation of the private sector in the Build. It's just that it's not perhaps being communicated as much as the other projects. So in fact, there are 21 projects in the ICC process. ICC is the Investment Coordination Committee that approves projects that go beyond a certain amount. So 6 of these are airports, 6 are rail, there are 2 that are road projects. I actually have a map here of where these are. You can see they are distributed across all major islands of the Philippines, but of course most of these are in Manila. So the green ones are airport projects, and then the red ones are rail projects, and yellows are other types of projects, various kinds of projects. We have even one seaport project in Zamboanga. So I guess the issue is that we're not communicating this as much as the other projects, and that the explanation is that because these are unsolicited and most of these are undergoing appraisal and evaluation, we can't really talk much about this until they have reached approval stage, like the San Miguel Airport, which has been approved after the whole process took 14 months.
For the ordinary men and women, what's important is jobs, like, build. And that was one of the promises of the Duterte administration, that this would generate jobs, enough jobs for Filipinos, Filipino nationals. Yes, Joey, where are we in that? Congressman.
If you look at the April bless, we've created 1.3484 million jobs. And the average for the first half is 484,000. That's actually, we expect a pickup probably because more people went into college because this is the first year that the senior are going into college. And second is the fact, if you disaggregate, 4.222 million is in construction. That's an increase of almost, there's an increase of 250,000, and I attribute that to Build.
We need to take a very quick break again. We'll be right back.
Certainly will.
Welcome back to a CNN Philippines special presentation, Building for the Futures. DBM is saying 52 of the 75 flagship projects are ODA. How confident are we that we are going to get that funding? That we are going to get that?
Insofar as we are concerned, the Department of Transportation, most of our projects are ODA. The loan agreements have been signed and executed. So where are the funds? It's there. You know, insofar as our GAA requirements are concerned, there has been approvals, and we now find a more understanding and cooperating House of Representatives and Senate that will understand our budgetary requirements, and we are confident the GAA requirements will be there.
We have heard, though, that China is being slow in their take-up of ODA funding for the Philippines. Is that true?
We are working on it now. Different countries have different approaches. In fact, during the state...
So it sounds to me like China's not where you would expect it to be as far as funding.
We would like to think that there are certain requirements being required by the Chinese government, and we try to seek compliances. Are we delayed at this point in time? No.
Is China driving a hard bargain? You said that you're still negotiating with them, and there has been a lot of talk and a lot of, evidence that China has not, drives a very hard bargain.
When we say driving a hard bargain, we have to define our terms.
Well, if you compare it with what we've seen in Sri Lanka and Pakistan, where there have been problems with repayment of loans, which has let collateral go to China.
There's one basic difference between the Chinese relationship with other countries as regards our project. One is the basic difference. We choose our project. In other countries that have been funded by the Chinese government, it is
Beijing that tells them?
choose the project, the site of the projects. I'm telling you at this point in time, we don't have Chinese workers in the projects which we are
DOTR, for DPWH, wala rin.
Well, let me just really quickly, basically, I don't think there's anything wrong to begin with to have Chinese specialists. In many of our projects, such as the Inter-Island Bridge Program, we've never had projects of that magnitude before, which is why we tap foreign countries to help us bring technologies here. Part of that technology transfer is also having specialists who come here to also teach us how it's done. So if we have certain projects, in fact, the Chinese have given us grants for feasibility studies and even donated 2 bridges to us completely. So, of course, they bring in their specialists, but as a majority, it's still, the majority of the workers are still Filipino, but nevertheless, there are specialists who have certain skills that we do not necessarily have yet, and I don't see anything wrong with having them here to help the technology transfer.
Just coming back to what you were saying, Mr. C, about this level of employment in the Philippines. This is going to obviously continue for years if these infrastructure programs continue to roll out as we expect them to. How is that going to be solved? How is this employment shortage going to be solved? Will it be having to import labour?
Well, part of it is having to import labor and use new technologies. As we did some, our institute did some studies of some of the construction projects. They have some Chinese workers, but they are there, and it's up to us to learn the techniques that they are putting in. Now, of course, we have TESDA doing training of more workers, but a lot of it, we feel in the business sector right now, is an attitude issue because people are very choosy about their jobs. And also there's legislations that we have to deal with that are making legislations in tax and so forth that might have an impact here in terms of the investments as well as the workers' attitudes.
Let me put some numbers into the discussions regarding jobs. In relation to rails, direct employment in relation to rail projects, we are estimating around 58,000 direct employment. Indirect employment, more than 500,000, only on rails. Now, in order to address the requirements, there are what we call on-site skills training and off-site training. The off-site training consists of 2 parts. One, as mentioned is TESDA. The other is doing it on a long term. We are putting up, for example, in rails, a railway institute.
just three numbers. Underemployment from 18 to 13, released 1.8 million. In other words, additional less underemployed. We have 2.3 million unemployed. And actually, our participation rate has gone down from 66 to 60 because people went to school.
All right, and on that note, we just need to take a final quick break. This is a CNN Philippines special presentation. Be right back. Secretary Tugade, you were talking about railways, rails. Can you tell us the update on the Mindanao Railway?
The Mindanao Railway, we have more or less addressed the issue of alignment.
What do you mean by that, sir?
The alignment where the system will pass, Tagum, Digos,
Davao.
And our target is to be able, ma'am, to start actual construction by the first quarter of next year.
But just as an aside, why is it called the Mindanao Railway if the line is Davao, Digos, Tagum? That's basically Davao.
The entire network, ma'am, has three phases.
Okay, you're going to cover the entire Mindanao.
Yes,
We're
ma'am.
just starting off with the
That's
president's
correct,
hometown.
ma'am. But for the first phase, remember I mentioned about partial operability. The first phase will involve that portion to enable us to have partial operability.
I'd like to switch the conversation to starting with you, Chris Nelson. We spoke about this last time, transparency, and we heard from representatives of the government how you were setting up websites, how you were doing the transparency to avoid any corruption or any accusations of corruption in the build. Chris, someone looking at this, an overseas investor, how comfortable are they that the Philippines is going about this the right way?
Well, there's definitely been improvements. I mean, you've seen that in the indexes. I think, of course, they're also a related issue. That means things are obviously slower, right, because of the process. So it's a pro and con. It's not just a win-win. I think for overseas investors, they want to understand what's going on. One thing which is not specifically Bill, but I think we should bring it up here because I think it just goes into the context of the government, is the passage of the ease of doing business. That I think
Red tape, do you mean?
Yeah, well, they call it ease of doing business. They've set up a department called the Anti-Red Tape, ARTA, and I think that's a very important signal. Now, of course, we have to follow through with that signal, and the reason I raise that is that when we do our missions to the UK, the number one question is actually on ease of doing business.
Secretary Villar, since we're talking about ease of doing business, Andrew, I hope you don't mind, let's talk about the ease of getting right of way. How are things in that department?
Well, in terms of, you can see, like, well, I'll give a concrete example here in Metro Manila. We've recently, we're on pace to deliver two major projects that will really contribute greatly to the decongestion of EDSA, which is the Harbor Link and the Skyway Stage.
NLEX, SLEX?
Yes, it's called the Skyway Stage 3, which will essentially connect the NLEX to the SLEX. Now, this is some of the most challenging right-of-way. It includes numerous factories, buildings, settlers, which we're able to resolve because the tools are there. We have a process for right-of-way. It's a matter of focus, having a specific team dedicated to each project, and political will.
Ferdinand Pexon, one of the things that I'm astonished by with this forum compared with 15 months ago is how positive private enterprise is becoming with the PPP situation, because it was very clear 15 months ago that private enterprise was not happy. So are you saying that this is now no longer an issue, that the corporate Philippines is being included enough in this build? Are you happy with the ratio of ODA versus government funding versus PPP?
Well, I can only base it on the evidence, and the evidence I presented earlier, where you now have 20 or so projects, because out of the 21, one is it's also PPP, but it's a solicited type. But when you have investors proposing projects to government, that's a sure sign, a sure indication that they want to participate. And these are not measly amounts. These are billions of
These
pesos.
are unsolicited.
Unsolicited for the most
because
part, yes.
as opposed to the build program, the 75 big sort of big ticket items. So private enterprise is going its own way on unsolicited. What about getting inside the tent, if you like, inside, operating on those 75?
Yes, well, two things. One is for the ODAs that you mentioned, there is a good chance, in fact, we had discussed this also in the NEDA, that those that would be built through ODA would then be operated, the operation and maintenance could be done then through a PPP, meaning the private sector.
For our panelists today, we wanted to ask you this, for the private sector representatives especially, you've been down this road, you've seen big plans come and go. How optimistic are you that this is going to be a game changer? These are your final words, then we'll go to the other representatives. Chris Nelson first, please.
Sure. First of all, as I said, for me, it's not as much as I'd like to hit 75. That's not the important thing. I think the question is the direction. I am optimistic. However, I'm also think that the private sector is growing extremely strong, which produces even more challenges for you in terms of infrastructure building. And I would just say I'd like to see, along with the other chambers, more foreign investment, for more involvement, and more signals we can do. That I think will, because I think there's a lot of support and expertise, certainly in the UK, but in a lot of other countries, and that will be here to assist you. We are optimistic, but there are still challenges. Thank you.
George?
Yes, we've seen, unlike before, we're not just talking physical infrastructure. The government has forced a convergence of the payment systems and financial systems and human resource development. However, there are three things we want to see. One is the Filipino, as the president himself has said, has to take this up and put their effort and focus into using this so they can participate. Second is the technology is going to be changing. So, are we going to make the sharp turns? Because this is going to change the type of business that we have. And I forgot the third, but thank you.
Mr. Pecson, final words.
Well, what was mentioned by Congressman Salceda earlier, structural reforms, internal structural reforms are really very, very important, and because this helps to create a more, or shall we say, an environment that is more conducive for private sector participation. So one of the things I am looking forward to, Congressman, is the PPP Act. As you know, we have been working on that together, so we hope that also that in this Congress that would be passed.
Okay, and for our government officials, just a few words, starting with you, Congressman. Just what can you give us as far as your assurance that this will be done, that this build, we will be talking about in 10 years as a triumph?
I can only speak for what Congress is doing. Let me just run you what we have done for 1 month. Alcohol tax approved on 3rd.
How many pages is this?
The Incentive Investment Act was already approved. It's now in the floor. It's offering 6 years ITH, 4 years of lower seat at 13% on the 6th year. We have approved the much simpler passive income financial intermediation tax. We have approved the Foreign Investment Amendments Act. We have approved the Public Service Amendments Act, which will reduce utilities to only 3, water, electricity, and I forgot the other one. The new PPPA law has been referred to the committee. The National Valuation Service, which will facilitate ROA because it will set the price. On the 5th of September, we will invoke Rule 48 and get it approved. On the MVUC, we're now drafting the House rule, and we could raise between 11 to 25 billion. In the 2020 budget, we're more
So what you're saying is, over the last month, you have done these
proof of the
achievements,
pudding
and
is in the
there's no
is
reason.
in the law.
Secretary Villar, your assurance.
Yes, I detailed all the projects of the build, and it took me an hour and a half, and even then I wasn't able to detail all of them. But obviously I don't have time. But let me reassure everyone that the build program is already at an advanced stage, and you can feel confident that there will be dramatic improvements in our infrastructure, and more importantly, dramatic improvements in the quality of life.
The topic of our forum today is building for the future. This administration is really building for the future, and it's building for the future through the build. In the few moments that we are together, we have amplified in the Department of Transportation what we are doing in relation to building for the future. We have shown what we are doing and have done in rails, in aviation. For those who are having doubts and skepticism on what we are doing in build, I assure you we are hearing you. But in the same token, we will not use your doubts and skepticism to distract us, or even derail in our efforts to build, so that this administration can really be said that we are building for the future.
And this brings our special presentation of CNN Philippines to an end.
It certainly
Andrew?
does. Yes, on behalf of the CNN Philippines team, who are all in Visilewood, have done an amazing job here today. We would like to thank our guests specifically for devoting your valuable time and your valuable insights, even more important, and answering these questions on the future
So,
of
sir,
your country.
please join us upstage here. Secretary Art Tugade, Secretary Mark Villar, Mr. Ferdinand Pecson, Congressman Joey Salceda,
Second District Representative Joey Salgado and George Seed and Chris Nelson.
Thank you very much. And also
Thank
to
you.
all of you here at the Globe Auditorium here in Bonifacio Global City, here at the Taguig, thank you very much for joining us as well. We hope we've gotten some of the answers that you're looking for.
Thank you. Good night.